Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Chairman, Board of Governors, Ambassador Harith Mahmood Saab, Wani Saab, Rahmani Saab, respected Rahmani Saab, and Khurram Abbas, as well as all the young scholars that we have here today. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you very much. I think this is a very timely seminar that we are holding today. It is important because I believe that the issue of Jammu and Kashmir is one that we cannot wish away. We may like to at times, and I know that there are people even in Pakistan who feel that perhaps this is not as serious an issue as we all make it out to be, but this is very, very important. And today, as we commemorate the UN resolution calling for the self-determination, I think it's very important that we sit back and we actually ask ourselves the first question, is that what exactly is self-determination? How do we understand self-determination? What does self-determination mean to us and to the world? I know that you have all been, and it's good to see that young scholars are here today. I know you've been studying this issue, and you probably know, and you also we've had a very good morning with history being told to us about this entire issue. But what exactly is self-determination? As students of history, we all know it to be the right to freedom, the right to have the authority to control and govern as a people may wish to be governed. They have the choice, the right to have the choice of political freedom and status, and live with the authority and the responsibility within a territorial boundary as they may please, as they may wish, as the majority wishes. Now, this is enshrined in the UN Charter, which is enshrined in all the legal instruments that we come across. And ironically, if we think about it, in 1947, when the freedom movement for independence of India and Pakistan was ongoing, self-determination was an important aspect of that freedom movement. So it's very ironic that India, which gains its freedom through self-determination, has denied it to one of the majority states and peoples within its own boundary. It's very important to know that the UN, I mean, we like to criticize it, and we should criticize it in areas where we feel that the UN has not delivered on its promises, and there have been many, many promises. But we must also know that there have been success stories on the basis of self-determination. Kosovo, I believe very recently, East Timor, South Sudan, and various others, Ghana. Why is it that Kashmir still remains on the agenda? Why is it that the Kashmir issue is not even close to being resolved? Despite the fact that it is the oldest issue on the UN agenda. And unfortunately, I feel that it will probably remain on the agenda for many years to come without being resolved, as per the aspirations and wishes of its people. Over years of broken promises and lost opportunities, the struggle of the Kashmiris continues. And while the world looked away, and in many cases, and it's true today especially, has reduced the struggle of the Kashmiris to a bilateral territorial dispute between two neighbors, totally ignoring the flagrant and perpetual violations of human rights of the Kashmiri. What is even more disturbing to me, and I'm sure to many in this room, is that many of us in Pakistan also believe that Kashmir is a lost cause. अब कश्मीर में क्या बात करनी है, कुछ होना तो होना नहीं है. हिंदुस्तान तो बहुत ताकतवर मुल्क है, कश्मीर को ले लिया है, बस अब छोड़ दें कश्मीर को, कश्मीर का रोना रोना छोड़ दें, and let's focus on our own political problems, our own economic issues, which are many, no doubt. We are a country which is, the turmoils are just everywhere around the corner. But my answer to them has always been and will remain that, okay, चले हम छोड़ देते हैं कश्मीर को, हम अपने मसले मसाइल हल करने शुरू करते हैं, वो भी हमसे नहीं होंगे खैर से, लेकिन हम कश्मीरियों को अगर हम छोड़ देंगे तो आपका क्या ख्याल है कि कश्मीरी चुप हो जाएंगे? They are actually fighting for their survival. They are fighting for their right, which is not only inherent in UN law, but it is inherent in all humanitarian aspects, that they have the right to decide what they want to do. So you may wish to abandon the Kashmiris to their fate, but the Kashmiris will continue fighting. It is their future and their choice that they want to determine. This is beside the fact that international community, the world, in its collective conscience and humanity, should never ever set aside an issue in which human rights violations are at its core, because they are simply asking for the freedom to choose, which every other nation state has managed to do in history. I believe, and this has been discussed especially by Rahmani Saab and also Wani Saab, that I think one of the main reasons why we think like this in Pakistan is perhaps that there is a lack of understanding of the real issue of Kashmir. And that's where you people come in. And not only you people, but this institution as well. We need to mobilize public opinion, both internally and externally, and bring to light what actually is going on in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Many people don't know. In fact, people in Pakistan don't know, let alone people around the world. That, I think, is our shortcut. And we need to find ways in which we can take a leaf from the Palestinians. How have the Palestinians managed to keep their issue alive for the relatively the same amount of time that the Palestine issue came on the UN agenda, so did Kashmir. And yet their issue, I mean, you go to any TV channel, you open any newspaper, you find, but genocide in Gaza is a more recent phenomenon. But over the years, the Palestinian issue has never been put on the back burner. How have they managed to keep their issue alive, and the Kashmiris, who have a similar, if not almost same problem, that has gone on the back burner? Now, apart from the UN resolutions, it is also 77 years since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has come into being, and while its principles, equality, freedom, dignity, still command global respect and transcend religion, nationality, and ideology, yet we have not seen rights being given or rights being proclaimed, yet they continue to be violated. Okay, so there are the Rohingyas, we have the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza, we have devastation in Yemen, and we also have Kashmiris who are living under the fear of 900,000 Indian troops, not knowing if they're going to wake up in the morning alive or dead, if their loved ones are going to be around or they'll disappear. How many of you have heard, I'm sure you have, but I ask my international audience, how many of you have heard the term half-widow? What is a half-widow? Either you're a widow or you're not a widow. But in Kashmir, we have half-widows because we have women who don't know whether their husbands are alive or not. Decades have gone by and they don't know because they've disappeared. Mass graves have already been mentioned, so I won't mention that again. These are not isolated features. They reflect a broader collapse of our moral responsibility as the international community, as the United Nations. So we can condemn, there are so many statements, there are so many, I'm sorry to say, seminars, there are so many declarations articles on specific days like 5th January, 5th February, 27th October, these various dates that we have, 14th August, 23rd, these various dates that we have, so many declarations will be given by leadership of our country, by leading personalities in our country, by the Kashmiris themselves. But they've just been reduced to just declarations and nothing actually substantive comes out. So if we are to keep these resolutions and these Declaration of Human Rights as a credible document, I think we need to call upon the UN in a much more aggressive manner. I know that my colleagues sitting in the UN are working day and night, and they are actually doing much more than they should be actually doing so many, but we need to, as a nation, call upon the United Nations to implement its own resolutions, and we need to make sure that this UN Secretary General moves beyond just statements and declarations. I mean, he has, the present UN Secretary General, I think, has made more statements about the failure of his organization than any other Secretary General has. This is a time for the United Nations itself to introspect that why has it failed as an organization in implementing its own resolutions and ensuring peace in the world. Now, peace is also a very interesting word. And I think what's happened over the weekend shows that peace is also very selective. If there is peace, and that means absence of war in the developed world, in Europe or North America, that is fine. If there are problems in the peripheries, in the South, in Asia, in Latin America, in South America, in Africa, well, that we will deal with. That is not a breakdown of peace. These are conflicts that we can manage. This is inherently wrong. This is inherently incorrect. What we saw, I think all these declarations come to nil, to naught, when we see what happened over the weekend. And if a country can take a unilateral decision like that, then I think all these, the United Nations should actually, perhaps, in at least the peace and conflict era, back up, basically. They are very good in other agencies, and a lot of agencies in the United Nations have been very successful. But when it comes to peace and conflict resolution, I think that perhaps after what happened over the weekend, they should basically pack up. Now, in the same way, we have another organization which is directly related to us, and that's the Organization Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. And the OIC in 2005 decided to set up the Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission, of which there are 18 members. And it's by rotation. You get elected and you come and you serve for a period of 3 years, and then there's election again. Pakistan has been on the commission since its inception. And the IPHRC has been set up specifically to address human rights violations and the human rights situations for Muslims around the world. And these include Muslims not only in the OIC member states, but also in Muslims in non-OIC member states, the Muslim minorities around the world. For example, in India, there's a committee inside the commission which deals specifically with the Muslim minority situation in India, in the European Union, in the United States, and so forth. Special representatives of the OIC Secretary General have been nominated for Palestine, for Kashmir, for Muslim minorities. The self-determination of Palestinians and the situation in Gaza dominate the conversations, rightly so. But the struggle for Kashmiris is hardly discussed. And I tell you my own experience, I've been on this commission now for almost just over a year. For me, it is a huge struggle to even have a room full of the commissioners to listen to me about Kashmir. Because at that time, when the agenda of Kashmir comes on, even the commissioners sitting in the room decide to take a tea break or something individually. Because unfortunately, and I blame us also, I think that Pakistan has been lacking in this, we have not been able to voice the fragile and dangerous situation that exists in Kashmir and that the Muslims in Kashmir are facing. And the fact that it could in fact conflagrate into a much, much larger conflict. In fact, in the last meeting, it was just last December, I had to really push. In fact, some delegates, some commissioners actually came up to me and said, we don't know about the Kashmir issue, can you explain it to us? That is a sad reflection on us, I think, that we have to explain to, and they were diplomats, either they are diplomats or they are members of human rights commissions in their own respective countries. Whether it's in Ghana, or whether it is in Cote d'Ivoire, or whether it is in Iraq, or wherever. So, but in the last meeting, the only minimal success that we got was, after a lot of pushing and shoving, to get the struggle of the Kashmiris to become parts of the rights of youth dialogue and youth forum. There's a youth forum and a youth dialogue that has been set up in the OIC. And because there is a consensus, and I see the consensus around the table over here as well, that it is the young people who are going to carry the torch, and it is the young people who must fight for the rights of their fellow Muslims around the world. So we managed to put the Kashmiri youth into that. That is our, I think, our only success. Now, of course, it's dependent on us as Pakistan, who are unfortunately the voice that speaks for the Kashmiris, to make sure that Kashmiri youth do become part of that forum. But that's not enough. I think that the issue of Kashmir has to be raised on all forums of the OIC, in their discussions with their counterparts, whether it's in the UN, or even the suggestion that I have put forth, and I hope it's taken up, that when the bilateral discussions take place between OIC leaders with their counterparts in other countries, including India, because obviously they all have bilateral relations with India, they should raise the issue of Kashmir and the violation. They do raise the issue of the Muslim minorities in India. That they do. But they must also, with the same vigor, raise the issue of Kashmir and the need to resolve this long-standing dispute. Now, another thing that was discussed and that needs to be further highlighted is the impact on Kashmiri women and children, particularly on their mental and subsequently physical health. This should be a conversation across the board in all international fora. And I had the privilege of attending a meeting along with former Foreign Secretary Tamina Janjua and Dr. Shaheen Akhtar, which I'm sure many of you know. There is an international organized NGO called Conciliation Resources, headed by a Kashmiri, and they held a meeting in Scotland in August. And the interesting thing about that meeting was that while it ostensibly was examining the impact of Pakistan-India conflict, because it took place after May, so it was the conflict was fresh in everybody's mind, but it focused on the impact of such a conflict on the women. And we had two Kashmiri women there, one from Srinagar and one who was a local British, but she was from Azad Kashmir. So the woman who came from Srinagar, she highlighted, and that was the most interesting part of the dialogue, because in this meeting we had the former Foreign Secretary of India also present, Nirupama Rao, and a couple of Indian journalists as well. So the presentation that this young Kashmiri from Srinagar made was on the impact of and the mental health of the Kashmiri women and children in Srinagar, and how this conflict, which has been perpetuating since 1947, has had on the next generation, on the young people. So these traumas were actually an eye-opener, not only for many in that room, but also for us, because we also face a blackout. And I'm sorry, Vanessa, but we do. We don't know what actually is that. We read about it, we may see it in some documentaries, but we don't know exactly what is going on in Srinagar because of the media blackout. So it was an eye-opener for me and for many of us over there. And I had suggested also to the OIC, IPHRC, that they should invite such young Kashmiri women and men to talk to them about what is going on in Kashmir. In fact, the impact of that was that former Foreign Secretary Nirupama Rao did say that she acknowledged that yes, Kashmir is a flashpoint, Kashmir is a difficult place, that there are lots of atrocities taking place in Kashmir. She actually acknowledged that. But she said it's important to reshape the narrative from politics, and the issue of territorial dispute and territorial integrity should move to human beings, and the human aspect should be highlighted. And she suggested that we should resume, both India and Pakistan should be talking about resuming the bus service, for instance, across the LOC, and restart the cross-border trade, which for so many years since Modi Sahib has halted. I feel that, and she also talked about disaster relief operations because of the natural disaster areas that we live in. I feel that now, and I tend to agree with Ghulam Nabi Fai and as well as Fani Sani, that now we have a window of opportunity after August 2025. This new bonhomie that we have with Mr. Trump, and the fact that Mr. Trump claims that, he has managed to end the war between Pakistan and India, which the Indians don't accept, but this is what Mr. Trump says. We should use this opportunity to continue to highlight the catastrophe that a nuclear armed conflict could have if this issue isn't resolved. And to highlight that it is not merely a bilateral territorial dispute. It is a moral issue, it is a global strategic issue, because Kashmir is bordered by 3 nuclear weapon states. And we have to understand, we have to highlight that this is the moral responsibility of the world to resolve the Kashmir issue as per the aspirations of the Kashmiris. If it can happen in other countries, in other areas, why can't it be happen? Why can't it happen in Kashmir? We should call upon the UN to once again have a special envoy dedicated to Kashmir. Certainly not a Pakistani, because that would color the lens very darkly, but somebody from another country come in with a totally open mind and a totally different view and become a special envoy of the United Nations on the Kashmir issue. We should push for that. And very interestingly, when we talked about Kashmir at the OIC, the delegate from Nigeria actually asked a very pertinent question, and I raised this morning with the chairman also, that he said, why doesn't, because most of the atrocities have happened, I mean, there have been atrocities going on since the problem started, but the Modi government has actually gone way ahead in violating all the principles of human rights in Kashmir. He said that why can't Pakistan take a page from South Africa, for instance, and like Netanyahu was taken to the International Criminal Court, why can't Pakistan consider taking Mr. Modi to the International Criminal Court? This is a question that was raised, and I think it's a question that we should all be asking, and we should be researching. We should find out what is stopping us from taking Prime Minister Modi to the International Criminal Court. Not the Court of Justice, but the International Criminal Court, on the violations of human rights. So I think, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is time that first we have to understand what is the problem in Kashmir, and we have to accept that Kashmir is a real issue. We cannot just brush it under the carpet. We cannot say, oh, the Kashmir ka to kuch nahi ho sakta. We cannot do that. It is not only bad for the Kashmiris, although the Kashmiris will manage to, because any nation that wants to struggle, they will struggle and find their independence somehow. But it is bad for us as Pakistan, because don't forget there is a part of Kashmir that is with us as well. So I think it's very important for us to actually continue mobilizing public opinion on Kashmir. That is the only way. Otherwise, these resolutions, so many of them, as Rahmani Saab said, there are so many, dozens of resolutions. They will go